Before we meet next Thursday, I wanted to take this opportunity and show some ways that Google Forms have been used, both as management tools and procedures, as well as assessments and reflection documents for students to demonstrate learning. So when we're together on Thursday, we'll talk more and you'll have the opportunity to create forms themselves, but that will require you to bring some things with you, and it might help to have an idea then of the type of form you'd like to create. A few ways that forms are used are often for sign-ups. So for example, for the CTC College Day that happened in the fall, students completed a form, selected the sessions they were interested in attending, and then it populated a spreadsheet automatically that had by student the record of what they submitted, so schedules could be made and printed, and we would have documentation of who selected what. So that's one way a form can be used. Forms can be used for sign-up information. A second way you could use forms, again as a management tool, would be to collect student information. So if there's information like email addresses or other contact information that you need, or if students you just want to ask questions like get to know you questions, you could create essentially a student inventory with a form. And again, before the form is populated with responses, you can see it auto-creates a spreadsheet, your questions are across the top, and as students complete the form, the records would start to show up there. One thing I used forms for with some of my students was as an assignment submission tool. My students had to create digital portfolios, and instead of me keeping track of all of their links because they were websites, students submitted the link here as the last question in the form, and then I had one place to go to get to all of their sites. So depending on how you need to use the information that's there or that you're asking for, it might make sense to populate it in a spreadsheet like this using a form so that you have easy access to get to the information you need. So I could go through, click on student portfolios, and then provide the feedback and have one place where I have all of that information. So you could use it as a management tool or a procedure for collecting assignments. There's a classroom in the building that uses it as a sign-in and sign-out form. So if students need to leave, they enter in their name, they choose where they're going to, and then that instructor has a digital record documentation of when students are in and out of the classroom. So that's another way you could use forms to collect information and kind of manage some of the procedures in your programs. Other ways forms are used are for assessments. So for example, you could create your assessment questions. All of that information would be populated into a spreadsheet by student as they submit. And there are some additional functions, some add-ons you can use that would give you a grades sheet. So it would auto-grade the questions. You would have record of students, how they performed on the test. Here, because students were allowed to take the test multiple times, you can see how many times students took the test. And I've hidden the rows for protecting student information, but you would have a column that has their names, and up here you would have the total points possible, the average that your class did. You could see the number of times the assessment was taken, as well as number of low scoring questions, which you can adjust what qualifies as a low scoring question in the settings. So that's another way you can use forms for assessments. Maybe it's a quiz, maybe it's an actual end of a unit test, pre-test, post-test. Forms can be used for that. In addition to just text questions, you can use forms with images, you can use forms with videos, and so you can give students some of that visual experience of an assessment. Oftentimes there's figures they refer to, and in addition to that, as they type in their answers, you can chunk information by creating multiple sections. So if you noticed, I just clicked continue and it brought me to a whole nother page. So now I have another figure and I have additional information to enter. And again, students have a back button so they can answer their questions if they're required, but they can also jump back and forth between the two for navigating the test. So that's another way to use it as an assessment and give some additional resources within that assessment. Other ways forms can be used are for lab reflections or reflections in general. So maybe after particular tasks, students are asked to complete a reflection, and they can do that using a form also. So in this case, they pick their name, put in their email address, indicate what they did. And again, you as an instructor would get a spreadsheet of all of their responses. So you get just a wealth of data, and then the next step is determining what do I need to do with that, or what do I want to do with that. And thinking about that as you're thinking of ways forms might be integrated into your program or your classroom, some considerations are who is going to need to respond. So who do you need the information from? What type of information do you need? What kind of information are you looking for? Why do you need the information? Is it for assessment purposes? Is it for documentation? Or is it a management purpose? Some of those examples that you've seen in this video. And then lastly, how does that information need to be manipulated? And by that I mean, what do you need to do with the information once you have it? Does it need to be grouped and sorted by students? Does it need to be modified in any way? If it's growth data that you're somehow using in a sheet, do you need to be able to apply formulas? How much work do you need to be able to do with that once you have it collected? So those are just some things to be thinking about before we meet this week. And by this week, I mean next week, next Thursday. So as you are thinking about that and thinking about a type of form you'd like to create, if it's an assessment, bring your assessments and you can have those questions, you can enter those into the form. If you're interested in a student information form, be thinking about what kinds of questions you have so that when we get to the point where we're together, we can focus on editing the form, creating the form, instead of thinking and brainstorming about what you'd like to include. So take a couple minutes and answer the questions below, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Thursday.